So here we are, just 5 league games in, and we're back with our first Championship Manager special of the season. And let's be honest, it's been a great waste, an unnecessary waste of everyone's time at that. We are, of course, talking about Sheffield United, who after a 5-0 defeat and a continued pointless start against Ipswich on Friday night, sacked Ruben Selles and have brought back today Chris Wilder for a third spell in charge. The man who was sacked in the summer after achieving 92 points and losing in the playoff final. We're not going to make this a long one because you can go back to what we said 3 months ago when we essentially said this was the wrong decision and that they should have stuck with Chris Wilder. And thankfully, the board seemed to have seen sense from a Sheffield United point of view. But very quickly, we will talk about the old man, the new man, and what we expect for Sheffield United moving forward, because some of the changes in the squad are quite interesting, particularly for me as a Luton fan. So let's start by very quickly covering the 6-game disaster that was the Ruben Selles spell. 5 league defeats, 1 cup defeat, 0% win rate, 0% draw rate, 100% defeat. It's not just the fact that they lost those games, was it? It was the manner of the defeats. And it's maybe the one thing that surprised me out of this. If you go back, Ruben Selles was a gamble. The change of style was a gamble. And it was also a little bit misleading. We talked about it in that manager special. Nothing from Celes' history had suggested that he could produce an entertaining team and a team that was going to be exciting to watch and good going forward. And actually, while that didn't materialise, the thing that probably surprised me the most was the fact that they were then so poor at the back as well. One of the things he has done very well, particularly at Reading and at Hull City last season as well, where they stayed up on goal difference, is he made them fairly hard to beat. Sheffield United were quite the opposite. We saw the warning signs with that 4-1 defeat against Bristol City on the opening day, where they did create chances but got carved open on the counter. And while we saw the Birmingham defeat in the cup, we watched that on a live stream, they could have lost by a lot more. And then they tried to shore it up, but in those games they weren't able to create many chances, didn't have shots on target away from home until the second half of the Ipswich game on Friday night, where they then lost by 5, and the writing was on the wall. The manner of the goals, the fact that players who had newly signed for the club weren't tracking back, were sort of jogging after losing the ball. It didn't look like a happy camp. And while we mentioned the facts, and Ruben Selles alluded to it in some of his post-match interviews, look, Sheffield United did lose key players in the summer, and we talked a lot about the board's tendency to go towards this AI data system. And look, data has a crucial role to play in football and in transfers and recruitment. It's a brilliant addition. It's a brilliant help to clubs to help find good players and good recruitment. However, it should not be the only source. You have to judge a character. You have to judge a personality. And we'll get on to that a bit with some of the players that have come in later on. Players that I've watched a lot over the last year or two. But as a result, Ruben Selles very unsurprisingly sacked and the first man to go in a championship this season. And replaced by a very familiar name. Chris Wilder, just 6 games after being dismissed, is back again. Now, there's one thing that disappoints me from the statement. They thank Ruben Selles during it again, which wasn't needed. They talk about Wilder's proven leadership. He's been given a 2-year deal and he'll kick off on Saturday. Now, of course, they've talked about the fact that they understand he's the right person to restore momentum and unite the squad and supporters, being a fan himself. They didn't just admit their mistake. And you know what? I think Sheffield United fans might have actually gone away to just forgive them if they went, do you know what? We're sorry. This wasn't the right decision. We're bringing back Chris Wilder. And I know the actions speak that, but just say it in your statement. Just say we made a mistake. Chris Wilder returns. We should have kept him. We've brought him back. Because all they've done really is waste a lot of money on paying off 2 contracts and then ended up with the same man again, but with less chance of promotion because of a shoddy start to the season. Either way, though, we're not going to panic on that just yet because Chris Wilder has got a great managerial record. He finished last season with 2 points a game, left his spell at Sheffield United with a 44% win rate almost, despite the fact the first half of that was nearly losing every week in the Premier League. He's done a very good job, and he's someone who divides opinion. I've not always been the biggest fan of, but there is no doubt of the qualities that he possesses. And Sheffield United last season, they were stubborn. They had one off week and came up against 2 teams who achieved 100 points. In almost any other season, they would have been promoted, despite the 2-point deduction that they started the season with. So he did far better than most people expected. And I know it was a disappointing day at Wembley against Sunderland, but like we saw with Leeds the prior year, and the point I made in that the summer manager special, if you kept Chris Wilder, he would have been pretty much everyone's favourites to get promoted with Sheffield United and do what Daniel Farke did last year at Leeds, where they then got 100 points and took the next step. And they were well on their way to doing that. But the board decided that they wanted to go down this new route, this new modern route that so many clubs fall into the trap of and very few end up succeeding in. But now Chris Wilder is back, and it's going to be an interesting time for him because we look at the spell that he's got coming up, and on paper, it's the perfect time to do it. You look at the first 12 games, I was just having a run down the fixtures. At home to Charlton, newly promoted. At home in that time as well to Derby, QPR, Portsmouth, all in the bottom half last season. Away to Preston, Oxford, Hull City, all in the bottom half last season. Only really out of those opening 12, obviously the Steel City Derby, where Sheffield Wednesday are in disarray. The only real games in that opening period of 12 up towards the end of November, where they face Leicester, are Coventry away, Southampton at home, who haven't had the best starts themselves, and Blackburn away, who can be hit and miss since Valérien Ismaël took charge. There's not a great deal for them to fear there, and if he can restore momentum and get a little bit of resilience back into the team, they've got a way to go. And look, while the Ruben Selles results were disastrous, the defending was awful, and some of the effort towards the end didn't look great on paper, what we did see was a team that still created some chances. They were underperforming their expected goals significantly, and obviously weren't hitting the target with several good opportunities. So I think we will see a very quick change on that front. We'll see a few of the Chris Wilder familiars come in, but that's where I sort of wanted to hit on the concern I have for this season with Sheffield United still, because we mentioned it earlier in the summer and in the prediction show. Vinicius Souza leaving, Ano Ahmedhodzic leaving, Kiefer Moore going, and of course a trusty companion of Chris Wilder and Jack Robinson at the back. All of them leaving the club, key parts of the spine of the team. And with the greatest of respect, the people that have come in some areas might not live up to that. Now, there are some very good players in there. I've seen a lot of them at Luton myself. Ogbene's an absolute gem. Brilliant signing, will do really well for them once he gets back up to speed. Tae Chong has got potential. There was a spell in the Premier League where he was our best player. And of course, you look at other experienced signings, Danny Ings, Ben Mee, you know exactly what you're going to get from them, even if they are slightly past their prime. You've also got the excitement of certain young players. So Louis Barry, we've seen plenty of potential from in the EFL before. And of course, people like Ben Godfrey on their day can be very talented players. But I need to highlight a couple on deadline day. And I know I talked about it a fair bit before. Mark McGuinness coming in from Luton. This is the perfect example of data going wrong in recruitment. And I don't want to sound like I'm digging him out because I've got nothing against the man personally. I hope he goes on to have a good career. But I watched him a bit at Cardiff. He was then signed by Luton due to database signings and data-led technology. And the same again coming into Sheffield United here. But you've got to watch what you're seeing with your own eyes. And my biggest problem becomes mentality. And it's a similar issue when it comes to Japhet Tanganga as well. He's a very good player technically. And again, the metrics all look pretty decent. But if you go into what you're watching with your own eyes, and one of the criticisms I had of Mark McGuinness and a few players that came into Luton last year is they were all very good for a decent period of time. But as soon as you saw a mistake in the game, and it actually happened in McGuinness's first month at Luton against QPR at home, where Frey bullied him for a goal, he made a big mistake. And after that, completely capitulated. And he'd been brilliant up until that point. And it's something we saw far too often during the season. And it's something that data can't get you around because for 60, 70 minutes, those players look great. But then can they recover from a mistake? Is there that mentality to step up when it matters? Now, you'd hope with these players who are still fairly young or have still got plenty of football ahead of them, that with good leaders in the dressing room like Ben Mee, with a leader like Chris Wilder, who is very well known for being a people's person, for getting the best out of players, for having that personal relationship with his squad when he goes in, you do feel that he'll be able to help turn some of those around. But it is a big problem I have with data-led signings that, yes, that is brilliant that a player has got the technical ability to do all the things you want. But you've got to judge the character still. You've got to know the people. And it was sort of that fallout prior to the summer that led to Chris Wilder leaving. A disagreement over the alignment going forward and the signings and how they were going to materialise. He just wanted to have that say. And I think moving forward, he's probably going to have had that conversation now to say, you've seen what happened. We're going to do it my way. He's been named manager rather than head coach. Of course, a suggestion that he's going to get the lead on that front as well. And he takes charge of his first game at the weekend against Charlton, where, if I'm being brutally honest with you, I wouldn't be shocked if they picked up a result. It's not going to be instantly easy, and Charlton are going to be very tough opposition defensively. They will sit behind the ball and try and hit on the counter, which at times last season Sheffield United struggled with under Wilder. I do feel that they've got a slightly weaker squad than they had last year. Of course, big boost that they were able to keep people such as Gus Harmer, who obviously was on the bench against Ipswich, but is an excellent player at his best and had a great relationship with Wilder. So at least until January, you will get to see that then. But I do fear that there is a slightly imbalanced squad. There were a lot of panic signings, in my opinion, at the end of the window and trying to complete that change of style too quickly. Something, again, I saw with Luton a year earlier. So there are still worries for me with Sheffield United, but it's not an unprecedented situation, is it? Because people asking about promotion and the playoffs and still being able to push. And of course, it looks a bit grim for Sheffield United at the minute. 0 points, terrible goal difference, -11, only one scored in 5 games. But as we said, the data behind that isn't as bad as it looks on the attacking front. And we know Chris Wilder will organise this team because there is no other option now than to try and make them a bit resilient and get them out of trouble. After that, can they look up? Well, we go back to 21-22. When did Steve Cooper come in at Nottingham Forest? They were on 1 point after 7 games, if I remember, when Chris Hughton was sacked. And in came Steve Cooper. They flew up the division into the playoff places and ended up winning promotion to the Premier League. Am I saying that's going to happen? Probably not, but I would still fancy them to have an outside chance at the playoffs this year because ultimately we're talking at this stage of the season about a less than double figure point difference. Coventry are on 9 in the playoff places. It's not a great world away, is it? And if we look at the situation again, it's not the strongest championship table. We look at the teams that have come down. Sheffield United, obviously the best of the rest last season that didn't get promoted. Southampton haven't hit the ground running. We've seen with Ipswich, it was a little bit hit and miss before that big win against Sheffield United at the weekend. We've seen that there are troubles for some of these sides. And look, Leicester have obviously got the looming charges and things behind them too. It's not a foregone conclusion that Sheffield United can't work their way back up. And with the right organisation, with the right setup and with the right team, you'd certainly expect Chris Wilder to have them up the division. No threat of relegation in my opinion. But I do worry with some of the replacements that have come in this year that perhaps they're not going to be quite as strong as they were before. But I think pre-season I put them in the lower half of the playoffs. I wouldn't be shocked if they ended up getting in there as well. But I would certainly expect them to recover and end up this season in the top half of the division if Chris Wilder is allowed to do his work in January too. In the short term, though, I expect a strong start. I think it's obviously the right decision, but it's a position we shouldn't have been in. We all know Chris Wilder shouldn't have been let go in the summer. We all said the Celes appointment was a gamble, and it's a gamble that hasn't paid off, quite frankly. But they've got the chance to bounce back now. It's just whether the squad that has been heavily changed to favour the players that Ruben Selles wanted, whether they will be able to recover from that and Chris Wilder get them set up in his direction. I think he'll be able to do that. He's been versatile at clubs before, has had success at several other EFL and non-league clubs. Will he be able to do it here? What do you think? Let us know down in the comments below. Will he actually see out his contract this time, or will Sheffield United make the same mistake for a second and third time? Let us know your thoughts on that in the comments section. We will, of course, be back on Wednesday for our Championship weekend preview, our prediction show. Come and get involved in that. Make sure you turn the notification bell on to make sure you don't miss a thing. If you enjoyed this little look at Chris Wilder's reappointment, then please do like and subscribe. We'll be back soon, but let us know your thoughts in the comments. Was the Ruben Selles disaster worth it? Or have we all been proven right and Chris Wilder should not have been let go in the first place?